If an EMP hits, it is the worst case scenario, but not necessarily from losing your electronics, understand. So watch this video, be prepared, and you can survive this. Because that is the point, right? Survival in these worst of times. And a big part of it is because the power goes out. But how do you know it came from an EMP? A quick story. I was at a thrift store years ago in Florida, and the power went out. It's such a weird, ominous feeling when the power goes out when you're in the store. And I'm thinking, oh, EMP. I went right to the front, looked out the windows. The cars are still whizzing by. But understand that cars will still run after an EMP. 95% of them, even modern cars. And your phone, I mean, I could have pulled my phone out, but phones will still work too. Most of them will. Don't go with all the rumors that all these things will stop, because that's simply not true. That is fiction. But the thing is, you cannot depend on your cell phone working. That's the key. If something's connected to the grid, plugged in the wall, it's going to fry. But if it's not, if you're just holding your cell phone, excellent chance it will survive, but no guarantee. Same thing with your car. All cars will stall out as you're driving them when an EMP hits. 95% of them will start back up again. Get rid of the rumors. You have a pacemaker. People worry about this. An EMP goes off. People worry, oh, will my pacemaker stop? 0% chance it'll stop. It will not stop at all. There's been extensive studies and tests by this. EMPs in the lab, which we can do, by the way. Every single time, pacemakers will continue to keep working. Small electronics, most of them, will still continue to work. But don't think that you're out of the woods, because something much worse is coming. And we're going to look at the first worst case scenario. There's two of them, by the way. In this first one, you have to find out where the EMP came from. I mean, for example, it could come from a coronal mass ejection, where the sun puts off such a huge amount of energy, it can cause like an EMP. It's not an EMP, but it has the same effect, sometimes even worse. And the results can be catastrophic, depending on how powerful the ejection is. But if it is a deliberate attack, like a nuclear detonation, we have to look at, well, the delivery system of that nuclear detonation. For example, if you have a nuclear detonation on the Earth's surface, it's not going to be widespread. For example, if DC gets hit by a nuke, it will not cause an EMP in Denver, for example. But if the actual nuclear detonation takes place in our upper atmosphere, that's a different story. It will be far more widespread, but not country widespread. We need 6 airburst detonations across our country to literally take our entire grid system down, all 3 grids, by the way, and make it so we have no electricity or power. But understand, if that's the case, we are under attack, and it is nothing short of nuclear war. And how's that? Because if we have an adversary shooting nuclear missiles at us, setting off these detonations in our upper atmosphere, and we need 6 of them, that means there's going to be 6 separate missiles coming in, ICBMs or submarine-launched missiles. And I know each missile contains multiple independent warheads, but we can't have one missile launching 6 warheads that will go across the entire country. So we're going to see 6 missiles coming across in the United States. You and I may not physically see them, but our military does. NORAD does. That's their job. And when they see these nuclear missiles coming in, they don't say something like, well, sir, don't worry about it. It's just an EMP. A nuclear missile is a nuclear missile. And if we see 6 nuclear missiles coming to the United States, we're going to launch 6 nuclear missiles toward that country or more. We're talking about nuclear war. And of course, we're talking about leading to possibly a major nuclear exchange. And now there's talk that our adversaries actually have nuclear weapons already in space, and they can just drop them down on us. And by the way, right now that's just speculation. It is something they're working on. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But either way, do you understand? If they're going to drop 6 nuclear bombs into our upper atmosphere from space that's already there, it's still going to lead to a nuclear war. And our military forces will retaliate, because our nuclear forces here in the United States are EMP hardened. In other words, you can set off EMPs, our nukes and everything will still work and will retaliate. So what do? If you see all the power go out, how do you know if it's going to be an EMP? Well, again, check your phone. Maybe your phones are working, maybe not. Go outside, see cars. At the very least, the cars will stall out, and then you can see them all restarting again. That's a good sign there's an EMP. So worst part number 1, if this happens, get ready for a probable nuclear exchange. They launch theirs against us, we launch ours against them, nuclear exchange. Worst case scenario, the last thing you worry about is your cell phone not working, right? It's not that at all. I mean, you see, if you do have an EMP, you'll have maybe 20 minutes before a further nuclear exchange takes place, maybe 20 minutes, depending on where you live. Submarine-launched nuclear missiles or hypersonic missiles on the coast, you'll have much less time. Center of the United States, I'm not saying you're going to get out of this scot-free, but at least you will know, you'll have a little bit of time to take cover. Oh yeah, good old duck and cover, anyone. Ready? Get inside in the middle of a building, get away from windows. It is like the old school nuclear attack. So surviving a nuclear attack, that's a whole different situation. In fact, a whole different video series. I have a whole series devoted to this as a nuclear specialist in the military. So I'll link that at the end to check it out. So an EMP, when we look at this as far as these worst case scenarios, what does that really mean? It means we have to worry about our beloved fellow man. This is the second worst case scenario. There's hundreds of millions of people in the United States, and it's those fellow men we have to worry about. Estimated about 3 days of relatively peacefulness until crap hits the fan, and it's those fellow men we do have to worry about at that time. So like, for example, let's say you are an hour away, you drove an hour away, that's 60 miles, 20 miles a day getting back home, that's hightailing it, by the way. So either way, the race is on, you need to start heading back home and get ready because the stuff is coming, but just, well, maybe in about 3 days before it happens. And that's understand 20 miles a day walking all day. It will take you about 3 days. And that in itself is no easy task, really trying to hightail it and make it home. But again, at this point, people are playing nice. More than likely, you'll find some people outside maybe give you like a banana or an apple or something as you're heading home to try to make it so you can get back to your family. And at this point, I really believe in humanity and how nice people are helping each other out. And again, we're talking about walking 20 miles a day. You'll still sleep at night to recuperate. And I bet a lot of these people will let you sleep at their house or in a barn or something like that. But either way, it's still pretty peaceful. And guess what? Remember, a lot of cars will still be working. Granted, there will be major traffic jams, and that will slow you down quite a bit. Now, getting some things for the trip back is going to be difficult when it comes to like food, because understand if this EMP hits and the grid goes down, there is practically speaking not going to be a store for you to go to get supplies. That's why I always say put a get home bag in your car, especially if you're traveling an hour away or more. Now, mom and pop stores, maybe you'll find one that has cash, but there's going to be a lot of people, especially a lot of like people in the prepper mindset will be hitting those stores very quickly. But any store above a mom and pop store, the internet's down, the grid's down. You've been to these stores before in power outages. They'll say, sorry, no cash accepted. You simply can't come in and buy anything. So having a bag that's already prepared to start heading home, you're good. Because remember, you have about 3 days. And when we see those 3 days at the end of it, the biggest problem that comes into play, the first place is hope. People are losing hope that things are going to get better. And you know what? Long story short, things are not going to get better. Because the thing is, after a natural disaster, people know it's only a matter of time before things return back to normal. Even if it's your house that gets hit, like by a tornado, for example, you have neighbors, they have shelters, you have insurance. There's a lot of things in place to try to put you back into, living a normal life. But if an EMP hits, there is no returning back to normal life. And the hope for everybody is going to start dwindling. I mean, at the very beginning, people will have generators out. They'll probably have barbecues and stuff. But as they don't hear any news and as things progress and they start seeing columns of smoke off in the distance, that hope starts disappearing. And when that happens, that's dangerous. And even more so, after 3 days, no one's taken a shower. They're hot, sticky, hungry. They don't know what's going on, or freezing because it's in the winter. And at the beginning, they are chatting with their neighbors, grilling their food from the fridge. They don't want it to go bad, and having a bottle of beer and everything's fine. Turned into, after 3 days, they're like, wait, why aren't things returning back to normal? Because the majority of the population right now already has their head buried in the sand anyway. And when things don't start returning back to normal again, they start giving up on hope and saying, oh, what's happening? And since they haven't prepared, panic sets in. And all those services you depend on will cease to exist. We're not talking about just the grocery store, but the police will be overwhelmed. Fire departments, no water pressure. Grocery store, no groceries. Gas stations, no gas. Hospitals, not only will they be overwhelmed, but their generators need gas too. And since there's no gas stations, it's all going to go downhill. And the thing is, most people have about 3 days worth of food in their pantry. But as their pantry runs empty, the second worst case scenario kicks in. And that second worst case scenario is hunger, desperation. As their food, they only had 3 days, they only had 5 days, is gone now. Oh boy, people are going to start getting really hungry. And that's a very dangerous situation too. And because of no food, violence. It's estimated that upwards of 90% of the population will die during this phase within 2 weeks. And I love it when people say, oh, you can go 3 weeks without food. I mean, first of all, good luck with that. In America, I challenge you to find a person who can go without one meal, missing a meal. I mean, you and I may be able to do it, and some people do it, but 1 day without food, 2 days, 3 days, that's where the desperation comes in. And when a parent sees their kid without food and all this desperation kicks in, violence will follow. And that's why so many people will die. It's violence because the food supply has now been cut off completely. But think about it this way. A public bulletin says, hey guys, your grocery stores are empty, but in 3 days, more food will arrive. And if that was the case, then the violence may not occur. It probably still will in some areas. But there's hope, right? But remember, hope is gone. There's not going to be a public bulletin because you know what? There's not going to be food in 3 days. And it's not simply just not having food, but it's not having food and having no hope and that hunger and desperation and everything else. The violence will kick in because of this. And we're going to see, this is the worst case scenario, absolute chaos as people are doing everything they can to get food. And combine that with those columns of smoke, no services, darkness, no showers, and not knowing, it will turn your lovely neighborhood in only 3 days into absolute chaos, absolute horribleness. Okay, so what do? You need to be ready for this and put yourself into a military mode. As soon as the EMP hits and you're home with your stuff, military mode. There's no more games, no more practicing, no more taking jokes about this. You need to be prepared and put this into action. First, fill your bathtub with water. Every container you can possibly find, fill them up. And I know at this point, you probably already have your stuff in your Faraday cage. Don't take it out just yet. Reason being, depending on what happens there, coronal mass ejection, more nukes, etc., the EMPs and everything may not be over, and you took it out and just had those systems fry. So just for the time being, keep them in the Faraday cage. And it's also time to begin rationing food. You need to go for the long haul. And that means also dealing with your chest freezer. Your chest freezer, hopefully you have a solar generator. It'll keep going. Solar generators will typically fare pretty well in the solar panels if they're not plugged in anyway. So you may want to take some of the stuff from your fridge and put it in your freezer. Some stuff that's in your freezer that's kind of like garbage food, maybe get rid of it. But it's time to start setting your food and getting ready for the long haul. For me, to be safe, I put my solar generators in huge military ammo boxes. They work great. But you need to ration food. Look to see how much you have. Take inventory. See who's in your house. Is it family? Does your neighbor come by? And try to estimate how much you're going to be able to give each person every single day to keep going. And this is dangerous because, people want to go back to the lifestyle of just eating everything and eating too much, etc. Oh no, it is for the long haul now, and you need to absolutely ration it out and decide how much everybody gets per day. However, people will still come to your door for food. They'll go to everybody's door and try to get some of you. So you need to spread it out, put it in different locations, even bury it in food-grade containers, and be ready for this because they want your food. Desperation and hunger. A lot of them don't want violence, but as long as they get your food, they won't be violent. So make sure you have everything set up food-wise, so even if they do raid you, maybe they only get a little bit. I always talk about things like, make it so you looks like your house has already been raided. Take some flat black spray paint, break windows, make it look like it's burned. Literally burn a car in your front driveway, one you don't need anymore, obviously. Completely burn it, and it'll make your home simply less inviting to people coming by, like marauders, for example. And with this, you obviously need to set watches and security. You need to have it so you have one eye open. Not you sleeping with one eye open, but literally, let's say you have 3 people, 8-hour rotation and shifts. Somebody has to be awake 24 hours to watch over your house and make sure you're protected. Barricade the entryways to your home, set up perimeter alarms. But even more so, you have to be careful how you cook food because the aromas will draw people in. Gardening will attract people. You need to do everything to kind of make it look like this is not a place they need to go. And your waste products, well, you're going to have to dig cat holes and make that your area. And I also talk about a drain blocker. I'll link that below. Drain blocker makes it so that way if you're in a city or town and sewage starts backing up, which it will, it doesn't come into your house. But you also need to have some bug out bags. I know, don't get caught up in the word bug out. But if there's some kind of emergency and you need to leave your house, like your house is on fire, you have to have your bags ready too. And I understand this is a last resort. Maybe your house is going to burn down. And if you're going to die, leave your home. That's the only reason you should be bugging out. But either way, you need to set into place the long haul. You need to prepare for this and be patient and relax. And now just practice going day by day, having security, rationing your food. But the key is do not panic and stay calm. This is why we prep. Because understand, it's not about living a comfortable life anymore. Not anymore anyway. You ration your food, stay put, play cards, keep yourself so your mind's out of this and understand, let the people outside, these hundreds of millions of people, annihilate each other because that's what they're going to do. They're going to annihilate each other, and you just need to ride that out. And literally, after a few months, 6 months, you may be able to come out the other side of this. Far less people in the world. I mean, I said it's a good thing. I love people, but that way you can be ready and prepare and survive because that's what it's all about, is surviving.